And we are live with Sharif El-Mekki for another amazing Freedom Friday. So we are fixing technical difficulties on our end. I've seen it for the last 2 days, but today I did some NASA-like work this morning to try and get this back on track technologically. So yeah, I'm having to like MacGyver over here, man, out here in the Outback.
Listen, I think we all need to download a course, on some MacGyverism with this technology, working at home with everybody else in the house. Like, it's going to take a whole lot of creativity. Kuumba in the house today. So good stuff.
I'm telling you, we got on our, you and I were just talking about it. On my end, we've got 2 kids who are on Xbox a lot, and then a daughter who is just thinking that she's going to make videos and stuff all the time. So, and then I'm trying to keep everybody fed. So how you doing, man?
Yeah, doing well, man. Freedom Friday, same boat, man. Got 2 little kids who think they're not actually on YouTube, but they think they're on YouTube. So they watch, so they just making videos all day long, soaking up all the Wi-Fi, and then the older kids got their own thing going on, and I'm trying to work. My wife is writing books and all this kind of stuff, and so yeah. But it's we're here, Freedom Friday.
Glad I'm not the only one who has daughters that think they're going to be famous. I tell her all the time, like, listen, if you're going to be famous, do your thing, girl, because dad's going to be old at some point. So you never know when you in the presence of greatness, do your thing. Anything else coming up this week for you before we jump into the show and just say, like, let's do some check-in. How was the week for you? Anything come up that did you well? Did you wrong?
Yeah, you know what's I'm super excited about. So we're wrapping up the training. This is the last day of training for our teacher apprentices. So we have over 60 high school and college students who are considering becoming teachers, and this will be part of their learning experience of what it is, what is teaching, what's virtual teaching, what is the mindset to teach Black and brown kids. So to see these 60 Black high school and college students engaging and doing the trainings and writing lesson plans and practicing their on video and getting feedback, it's been amazing, man. Like, every time I watch them, I get inspired. And so next week, Monday, they start teaching 112 students, my 6-year-old included, in a virtual Freedom Schools Literacy Academy, man. So I am hyped. Won't be able to sleep this weekend. I can't wait for Monday.
How many kids did you say?
112 from all over the country. Yeah, if we were in person, I mean, that's the one thing, like, responding to this Roro situation, like, this would have been 4 physical sites. But then when we went virtual, people responded, and people have been, like, donating incessantly, like $5, even, like, we got so many $5 donations. It's just heartfelt, and so we were able to, like, get books out. People bought our T-shirts, and so we were able to get more books to kids. So we did all these, like, little fundraisers, and people stepped in with some philanthropic dollars, and we went virtual, man. Got some laptops and
wow.
It's been good, man. It's been good, and excited to see how these 112 students respond to these young Black youth teaching them. So there'll be a coach.
What I think is so crazy, Sharif, is that, like, you had donation drives and stuff like this that I didn't know about. We could we need to be hawking this stuff. We need to be, like, letting people know how they can invest in the movement.
Oh yeah, appreciate that. Yeah, man. At one point we just, because some of them, I'm not that good with asking for money, but some friends said, it's just like, hey, you got this Stay Woke shirt. So Roland Martin wore the shirt, that he got at our convening, Black Male Educator convening recently. And somebody snapped a picture and it's just like, yo, y'all need to sell these shirts. Like, Roland is wearing it on this show. I was like, oh, okay. So we put out, like, hey, you buy a shirt, that sponsors a couple of books, that kind of thing. So
anytime you can get Roland out of a daishiki and into one of your shirts with his large network, people are going to want it. They're going to sell. You should be doing it here on our Freedom Friday so that people know how to support the work that you're doing and support everything, support the movement. Because that's what this is. At the end of the day, we are talking about a movement.
Yeah.
Well, let's jump in, man.
Yes, sir.
It's another Freedom Friday, and every week we are attempting to build fellowship and friendship amongst our community, our online community, and our friends and family who show up here all the time, and make the show better with comments, resources, thoughts, ideas. But also, what we are trying to do is recover our past. We are trying to create joint knowledge that we share together about the educators and the education that came before us, so that it could be useful to today. And we call these Freedom Fridays. And we should stop at some point and kind of keep framing this out about what Freedom Fridays means. I will say this: freedom for us as Black people has never been guaranteed. Freedom has never been guaranteed to us. In fact, the opposite is true. Bondage, captivity, limitations, subservience have always been guaranteed for us by law and customs and rules and social controls, which means we as a people must learn to be free. We must learn to be. We must learn. So Black education for us, as we discuss it on this show and elsewhere, is a heritage that we must shape. And it's a heritage that we must keep in view. We need to prune it and manicure it and keep it in the center it in our thinking as the asset that we have that will lead to our freedom. It is our vibranium, if this was in Wakanda terms, right?
Yeah.
That's what this heritage is for us. So we have to continually draw from it as a source, a wellspring from our ancestors. And our ancestors in education, specifically like our educational ancestors, are like the patron saints of that particular heritage that we need to recover. And we don't do it just to feel good about ourselves or to create self-esteem with each other. We do it, like I said, because we feel like it is the thing that will lead to our freedom. And the answers are there for us. So when we talk about history or the past, it's not to blow dust off of old books and look them up. It's to say we are searching. We are seekers. We are looking for our freedom. And we use history to make sense of today, to make sense of the present, so we can have a better future. So today, I want to talk about a couple of our educational ancestors that we choose. I've asked you to pick a couple, and I've picked two. And I just want to say for people, we've already talked about maybe 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 15 of them in the past, and we're going to keep talking about them and drawing them up, calling their names. But what I want to ask from listeners today who are watching this, and viewers who are watching this, you are not watchers, you are not bystanders, you are part of this discussion, damn it. So what I want for you guys,
less bystanders, more upstanders.
Let's get upstanders.
It.
All right. So upstanders, this is what I want from you all as your this is your fee for joining the conversation today. What I want you to drop into the comments is someone that you consider to be an educational ancestor, whoever they may be, of any race, any color, any background. Sharif and I draw on Black education, but I'm just interested in knowing from the people here, as you think about educating yourselves, your children, your community, and other people's children, what ancestry are you drawing on? Who is your particular educational ancestor that's most important? So I'll look for those in the comment. If I don't see any popping up, I'm going to kick you out. No, just kidding. We don't do that. We don't do that here. That's not what we're doing. We're not doing that. But anyways, let's get started, Sharif, with you. Welcome, Brother El-Mekki. Let the teaching commence.
Yeah.
Who are your educational ancestors you want to bring to the fore today?
Yeah. So you know what? I want to shout out two people. They're not ancestors yet, but I just want to kind of give this, what you said is so important, like studying who was there before and what they've done. So one is when I first became a teacher, our audience knows I was an alternative cert. I wanted to be a lawyer, but I was an activist. I wanted to dive into racial justice. It led me to the classroom. And I spoke about this at the Enstoy convention briefly. But my coach was Pennsylvania's Teacher of the Year in 93, 94. She was a Black woman. She was exceptional. And I think about when as you talk about like drawing this line, and I challenge people to like, what is your educational and intellectual genealogy? Where does it trace from? And so for me, it's in addition to the ancestors, people like Yvonne Savior, who was this amazing teacher for decades. And that's who I learned the pedagogy, how to teach, how to apply all my, my radical and activism thoughts into, well, what does it look like in a lesson plan? What does it look like for students to be able to learn from point A to point B? So I just wanted to shout her out. As far as our ancestors, one of them is Septima Clark. And the reason why she's so amazing is, this idea that educators as activists, this woman was fired from her teaching job because she had the audacity to be an uppity Negro and say, I am a woman. We are human beings. We are people. That was, if you did those kind of things, you were fired. And knowing that, she still decided to do that. She still worked with the NAACP. She still decided that, you know what, my humanity does not take a back seat while I'm educating my children. My humanity has actually had to be in the forefront while we're teaching these babies. And so, the fact that she did that continually, this Black woman who started teaching in South Carolina in a place I never heard of, Johns Island, probably one of those little islands off the coast of the Carolinas that, that was wholly forgotten by so many people. And she still started working. She joined a lawsuit, and they didn't want to pay Black and white teachers equally. And she was part of the movement to say, nah, like our work is just as important. You're going to respect us. You're going to hear us. And she ended up being fired, but that did not stop her. She continued to push the envelope and ended up eventually being on the school board, right? Just kept fighting, doing workshops. People may have heard of the Highlander Folk School down in Tennessee that people were going to get, just training and activism and this grassroots, educational center that people from all around the country were coming. And, she was working there and that helped, those workshops is what helped lead to the Montgomery bus boycott. So a lot of times people hear about the preachers. They also need to hear about the teachers that radically changed a lot of the conditions that we talk about during the civil rights movement.
Yeah, it's so real. We do hear about the preachers. We hear about the teachers. A lot of times we don't hear about the common folk either. Mm-hmm. What do you get from Fatima Clark that you draw on today in terms of we lift her name up and then we think about what the implications are for what we're trying to achieve now in education?
Yeah, I mean, for one, the biggest thing I think I pull from her work and her legacy is connecting racial justice, social justice, and educational justice. A lot of times people join schools and they're like, oh, because I like kids. And it's so much deeper than that. Like, I get actually annoyed when people are just like, oh, I like, because it's the same language that, oh, I want to work here because those puppies are cute. I want to work in this shelter because I love puppies. They're so cute. Oh, da, da, da. Like, listen, I'm not hiring you to come because these Black kids are cute. They are cute. They are sassy. They are brilliant. They are lovable. But I need you to connect this political activity, this subversive act of treating a Black child like they are a human being and that they have this God-given potential. Like that is more than them being cute. And so for her to connect the racial justice and educational justice, to me, that stands out for what she believed, what she did, what she was fired for, what she kept fighting for.
And do you see any of that? Do you see any of her lineage in schools or in educators today? Like, do you see, I see how you just applied it. Do you see it being applied or what look like echoes of her spirit in any schools today?
I do, but I think it's still individual. And what we need is a whole, the whole ecosystem, vibrate with that kind of mindset and that kind of language and those type of actions, right? And so you'll see individuals all around the country who are very tightly connecting both racial justice issues and educational justice issues. You see it in how they teach. You see it in the fact that they want to start schools. You see the fact that they are centering Black students and their experiences and engaging the community. But it's still like one-offs, right? You can go one classroom where a teacher has that mindset and go to the next classroom where the person is just there because it's a job. You can go to one school where you see the principal is like hell bent, like, oh no, that rule, we're not implementing that policy in this building full of these Black children because that is oppressive. And then you can go to the next one and see a principal who says, that's the job. That's what they told me to do. So that's what I'm going to do it. Right. And so you see it, but we need to string these together so that they become, right now, their fingers, we need them to coalesce so that they become a fist and more powerful for our communities.
That's a deep metaphor. We're going to present the educational fist.
That's right. That's right. That's what this is all about, right? Like, if you're like this, you're weak. I can pull you down. I can, undermine you and all of that. But like, no, let's pull together. And so we need more, like, just one, coalitions of understanding. We need, our team is working on, like, the Black Educator Bill of Rights. Like, we're working on that right now. Like, this is what we're demanding as Black educators, right? And so what does that mean? What does that do? How do we define the school to activism pipeline? How are we supporting the next group? Right now I'm working with Temple with this dual enrollment class with 16 students who are Black and brown who are thinking about becoming teachers. Right. And so like we're trying to prime the pump and say, oh, yeah, you know what? Some of them are freshmen in college. Some of them are seniors. But just like, you know what? Let the community know that help is on the way. Like the youth, that like if they're raised well, if they're educated well, when I say educated well, I mean like politically, then it's a different ball game. Because we know this isn't taught at most teacher colleges. They're learning about Skinner and B.F. Skinner and all these other behaviorists. You don't hear them talking about Black pedagogy. You don't hear them talking about Lorraine Moreau and what she did at Frederick Douglass School in New York, or Octavius Cato at the African Institute, which is now Cheney University, right? Or AJC. You showed the video last week of one of our instructors at the center. We talked about Anna Julia Cooper, right? That little rap video. Like, they're not talking about that in most teacher colleges, but that exists, and they didn't separate their work from racial justice and equity. But we do. Yeah. So we have to change that.
The problem in that for me is it seems like they're drawing from a well. You mentioned, who did you just mention? Skinner.
Yeah, B.F. Skinner and there's Piaget, a whole lot of
Piaget, Dewey,
Horace Mann,
and others. And a lot of those, what people need to know about education history that doesn't get talked about from our end. If that's your well that you're pulling from, be clear on the fact that well comes out of the Prussian education model. And the people that I just named, the earliest founders of public education in the United States, actually went over to Germany and looked at a Prussian model. And that model was based on the fact that they had lost wars and they wanted to create compliant soldiers. And they wanted to take out the individuality of the student so that they wouldn't make bad decisions on the battlefield. That is the basis for the Prussian model of education that eventually became the bells and the discrete classes and the lack of time to be able to think and just do form of industrialized schooling. That's where it comes from. That's the basis of it. If that is your educational ancestry that you're pulling from, the heritage that you're pulling from, that might not be the best well for us. When I go back to the beginning saying we are trying to teach people to be free. We're trying to raise free people. We're not raising children. We're trying to raise free people. We're trying to raise a revolution. And I don't know that you can do that by pulling from the same model of education that was meant to teach soldiers to be compliant little soldiers, right? Good little citizens and follow the rules. So anyways, we're looking to pull from a different well. So we got Fatima Clark on the table so far. Who's your number two that you're offering up today?
Yeah, my number two would be Dr. Marcus Foster. He was I think he was also born in South Carolina, but he's known as a Philadelphian. He did a lot of his work in North Philadelphia at Gratz High School. A lot of times when I talk about like one of my grandparents, both sets of grandparents refused to put their children into the neighborhood schools. Well, that school was one of the places that one said my paternal grandparents was like, nah, that's not happening. Well, in comes Dr. Foster, who was hired as this Black man, and it was very few of them. He may have been one of the very first at least in the city, to work in a large comprehensive high school. First thing he noticed that Black children had opted out and said, we're not attending that school. So they did like an unofficial boycott, just saying like, they don't, I'm not seen there. I'm not heard there. I don't experience being a human being there. So they, we call it dropped out. People call it dropped out. We call it pushed out, or not even let in, right? Like if the sign on the door says you are less than a human being, but come enroll your child, why would I, right? Like, so there's so many messages that we send to youth and that they're not wanted, but then we say, but come anyway. Like, you're not wanted here, but apply anyway, parents. Bring your child here. And Dr. Foster saw that and said, you know what? The first thing he did as a principal was go into the community, start talking to folks, introducing themselves, knocking on doors, the very doors that people are so-called afraid or just, look down their noses at. He was in there and shared a vision with families that they said, oh, you know what? Hey, right, maybe you want to go there. Let's go check it out. And enrollment surged. Students started making a commitment to education because it was going to be different, right? And so Dr. Marcus Foster is ours. He ended up being the first Black superintendent of a large district, which ended up in Oakland. So he was in Oakland as the superintendent, based off of his work in Philadelphia. And so he was hired there.
That's
people
where
don't have his
from.
Yep.
Okay, Oakland. You know what? Actually, and this is deep. This gets real deep.
Mm-hmm.
Marcus Foster is the only superintendent in the United States that was assassinated.
Exactly. That's exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
And he was assassinated basically, and this was during a time when people were trying to, and this is why, if you call yourself a revolutionary, you need to know exactly what you're doing, who you're talking to, be engaged with communities. And sometimes people come with all this woke stuff and they pointing their guns at the wrong folks. And I'm saying guns, as a metaphor, but he actually faced that, right? So here's assassinated. And the reason why he was assassinated, like if you get to the crux of it, it was that he had approved students to have IDs.
Mm-hmm. Student IDs on campuses.
Yeah. And so he had approved that. And there was a lot of backlash at that time. Now people are like, huh, really, what? But at that time, it was a lot of backlash around student IDs. And what they don't talk about is him talking to the community and trying to, understand what their concerns were and pushing it. So instead of dialogue, they assassinated him, but, not even knowing everything he contributed to this space.
The story that I heard with his assassination, and I could look it up later to make sure that this is closer to the truth so that I know that I'm not just saying stuff, was that instituting school IDs was a way to know who was on campus to make sure that you belonged there, because there were drug dealers that were actually trying to infiltrate Oakland schools and recruit kids to sell drugs in the schools and whatnot. So they instituted IDs. And the IDs, as it turned out, aggravated the drug dealers. So he apparently, the way I heard the story was, he was on his way into a school board meeting, when he was attacked and assassinated. Now think about that, though. Educators, like you say this all the time, and you said it here today, even about I want to go into teaching because kids are cute thing. Mm-hmm. If you want to go into teaching because you want to raise free people, because you want to raise the revolution, because you want to infiltrate and double cross, then
I love that.
Listen, it's real sometimes.
It's a different mindset, right?
It's a different mindset as an educator. You're closer to what people do when they go into other countries to help the people raise the revolution, but they know that there's some real danger. You're not just going to be like a Christian missionary coming into this village and not realize that there's an element of danger to it. And there's social dangers, meaning that you might lose some friends, you might learn some things and start talking differently, you might get uninvited to some things. And, like your story here with Marcus Foster, in some ways, that's not common, but it is a good example of how deep this work can be and how it can get, how deep it can get. All right, man. Well, Fatima Clark.
Yep, Septima, SEP.
Septima, I'm sorry. And
And Dr. Marcus Foster.
Marcus Foster.
And of course,
All right.
my honorary person,
Who's
Yvonne
honorary
Savior.
person? Who's that?
Yvonne Savior, the one who taught me and many other Black and Latino men who came into the classroom from other professions, taught us how to teach. Like, yeah, all that rah-rah, there's actually a science to teaching, right? Like there's an art and science and technical, moves that the best teachers make that folks who don't have that training have no idea. And so, yeah.
Well, I would have to say, if we're doing honoraries like in our own life, like
let's do one honorary and then
I'll do one honorary and then I'll do some of the. I mean, first of all, let's just say we've already talked about in past shows. We've talked about W.E.B. Du Bois. We've talked about Booker T. Washington, Mary McLeod Bethune, Lucy Craft Laney, who's a favorite of mine. Yeah. One of the people who's on my list today we've talked about before, but I'm bringing her up again. And what I hope to build over time is the idea that the lineage is continuous, so we could go decade by decade and find these people, and it would lead us to today, right? Yep. And I think a good place for anybody, a hero in this work, who's not someone I'm considering an ancestor because she's still alive. Anybody listening or watching, if you have not read Vanessa Siddle Walker's work, her research, her scholarship, her work, then you're missing out, because Vanessa Siddle Walker has put the pieces together in thinking through where Black pedagogy has been lost and what we're missing, because she's been able to detail what it was before and what we don't have now. So gotta listen or find her if you are. But she's not my honorary. Sharif, here's my honorary.
we could probably have like 20 people like right off the back, but Miss Grace, tell us about
Miss Grace, because in my entire K-12 education, I have no good years. So I mean, you know this about me. We've had this conversation before. I have no good years in my K-12. I have some good experiences here or there. I often was blamed myself for things that were going on in schools, and I was also often had adults in my own family life who were quick to consider the school was fine, but we were just making too much of the bad things about the schools anyway. So Mrs. Grace was I believe she was one of my 8th grade teachers, I want to say. Mrs. Mazzella, I remember in the 6th grade. Why do I remember? Not because I had a good experience, because she was racist as hell. Right. So the teachers that I remember are the teachers like that. I remember in 5th grade, I had a racist as hell teacher who couldn't stand any of us, all these little afros walking into her classroom every day. Mrs. Grace, I think in 8th grade, was the one who I'll never forget well, first of all, she hit a student. There was a girl in front of me who would mouth off from time to time. And there was one time in class where I just remember Mrs. Grace walking over to her and just standing there like this, with her. And the girl said one or two things. She was popping her gum. And I just saw the girl's head swing back and hit my desk and bounce back up. That's how close her desks were. And just popped the girl, just like solid. And I remember like it breaking, like some things break your innocence about a situation. Like I remember thinking, damn, this class can get crazy. And Mrs. Grace was also the one who walked in one day. Look at this, decades later, I still remember this. And she says, "You are some of the most ignorant Negroes I've ever seen in my life."
Wow.
That was her opening to a class once. And I got in trouble that day because I said something back. I can't remember what it was, but it wasn't appropriate for someone my age to say to her, right? That's what I really remember about the situation. So anyways, shout out to teachers that call you ignorant and make you want to learn outside of their classrooms, but not inside the classroom. Shout out to that, because I learned so much from that situation. There you go. How's that for an honorary? Does that work for you?
Yeah. Well, yeah. What you there's always a lesson, right? What to do and what not to do, right?
We're always learning.
Yeah, always learning.
Betty Harpole is an activist in Minneapolis. When I was on the school board, she would corner me after every meeting to talk to me about early childhood education. But she would also continuously say, "Stop saying our kids aren't learning. Stop saying our kids can't learn." Because she would hear me say in things like, "Our kids aren't learning in this school," and she would say, "Kids are always learning. You can't stop them from learning. They are learning all the time." So stop saying that they can't learn or whatnot. And that made a change in my thinking, because it is true.
It's
Even if they're not
important.
learning in your class, they're learning outside of your class to learn
Yeah,
something.
and even in your class, they may be learning, a negative racial identity, right? They may be learning from you that, you know what, I shouldn't aspire towards greatness. They may be learning to stay in that space. That's your space. So learning for particularly children and youth, it's like breathing. You can't stop it. What you're supposed to be doing is addressing the ecosystem and making sure that the oxygen that they're breathing is as pure as possible, that their learning is as pure as possible. If not, the constraints that you put on them will be intellectual, and they will forever hold on to those constraints. Right? Like that's the issue.
That's the thing you talk about, where if there isn't a back door, people who've been marginalized for years will create one.
They'll create one and say, my space is back there. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't. And you hear adults talking about what they don't deserve or what they can't do. Most of them didn't think like that as a child. They were taught to think in that way. Right.
Yeah.
And they're getting these lessons, as you said, incessantly. Like the anti-Blackness lessons are like, I mean, par for the course. You turn on the boob tube, you turn on television, radio, you're going to hear anti-Blackness. So what are the shields? So, the tools and the shields and the armor that we talk about on the 8 Black Hands a lot that you're supplying to students. Those are the lessons. Those are our lessons. Those are what our children have to, they're not going to get out of it unscathed, because it's just so pervasive, but we can definitely make sure that they are aware and see the traps and recognize what tools they have, and that they have a community. So yeah, I agree 100% with what'd you say her name was that taught you that?
Miss Harpole, Betty Harpole.
Miss Harpole, yeah, 100%. Like they are always learning, and who's teaching them, and who taught the folks who are standing in front of them today? Who are in those teacher college? What are those teachers bringing in their backpack that negatively influences or positively influences?
I think that's for educators, I think that's the thing to know, that you're bringing into the classroom, whether you know it or not, whether your biases are conscious or not, that you just standing there, just being there, there are messages that are jumping off of your body. You can, anyone watching this, and this isn't exclusive, for instance, to white teachers. We talk about white teachers a lot. But middle-class, college-educated Black teachers, which you have to be to actually teach, you actually have to be something approaching middle class. You definitely have to be educated at a college level, at a certain level. So there are times where you could walk into a classroom and not say a single thing, and you're already got messages coming off of your body, some positive, some not positive. So it would be important to always be aware of whether or not some of those messages are creating limitations for the students, that, like you just said, because limitations stick. They stick forever. Now, I walked away thinking that Miss Grace was a jackass, was a bougie jackass, New Orleans style bougie jackass. I didn't walk away feeling like it was any limitation in my thinking or whatnot, but I did walk away thinking to myself that whatever I learn, whatever I'm interested in life and have to acquire in terms of knowledge, has to happen outside of this joint. Because I mean, you have just told me that basically you're just a prison guard, that I'm just here, I have to be here, and you're just like, you're tolerating us, right? And aren't we lucky that your bougie ass came down here to teach us little, industry street Negroes, please, right? And that informs me as a parent, as an activist, as somebody in later life now who doesn't have to take your shit. So, anyways, let's move on, man. So you want to do mine?
Yeah. Let's hear yours.
So I could have pulled from a lot of different people throughout time, but the one that I think I want to stand up for this discussion, I think has bearing on where we are today, is Ron Edmonds. So Ron Edmonds was the father of the effective schools movement. In my mind, I always talk about the achievement gospels. And the achievement gospel to me is it's the counter theory to the deficit, the awfulizing, the deficit theories, the awfulizing of our kids, the they can't learn because they're poor, they can't learn because their parents are jacked up, they can't learn because they're in poverty, they can't learn because life has just been unfair to them and history's been unfair to them. Therefore, let's lower our expectations and standards for them in ways that we would never lower them for white kids or white people. Why? Because we want to train white kids and white people to be free people who rule the world. We want to treat Black kids as if they are a permanently victim class, a permanent victimized class of people who are so broken down and deficient that their subservience is going to carry on into the future. And the best we can do is get them some food, get them, a couple of pats on the head, maybe a tokenized position here or there within our systems, but we're not raising them to be free people. And our expectations show that. Mm-hmm. So the reason Ron Edmonds is important to me is because he came, I think, at a time in response to James Coleman. The Coleman report comes out in 65, 66, somewhere in there. And what people take away from the Coleman report is schools make very little difference. Money makes very little difference. Most things make very little difference except for the influence of the family and the culture. And the darker and the browner a school is, the blacker and browner a school is, the less chance that those kids are going to be able to cognitively succeed in the world, which is it's the genesis of the deficit model of thinking about Black children, even though it was taken as groundbreaking social science that told us everything we needed to know about everything. And it became the beginning, in my mind, of the academic belief gap. The belief gap, the difference between what our kids are capable of and what adults think they're capable of. Ron Edmonds comes along. He was a classroom teacher. He eventually became a state superintendent, a researcher, a college lecturer, a Harvard level lecturer. And his response to the Coleman report was to study schools where Black children were doing well. And in those schools, he found some characteristics that came to embody what he thought was the science behind effective schools. So one was safe and orderly environments, high expectations for students and for teachers, principals who provide instructional leadership, clear and focused missions, the opportunity to learn, and a large amount of student time on task, monitoring of student progress, and parental understanding of and support for the basic mission and parental participation in the school. So these are things that are not like, they may have been more groundbreaking then because people weren't studying Black success, they were studying Black failure constantly. But if these sound familiar, it's because all these years later, these are still embedded in the science, the educational science, not the social science of schools, and are still being built on, which means he built something that lasted for years. And here's a quote from him: "We can, whenever and wherever we choose, successfully teach all children whose schooling is of interest to us. We already know more than we need to do this. Whether we do it or not must finally depend on how we feel about the fact that we have not done it so far." That's
how comfortable we are with that.
Right.
How comfortable we are with not doing it. And if we're okay with that, then that's the trajectory that we'll stay on, right? At some point, the trajectory has to change, right? Like if two ships start off from the dock and they're going the same exact route, but one changes 5%, they're gonna end up at a very, very different space. If they change 15%, imagine where they are as opposed to where the original destination was supposed to be. So that really resonates with me, what you said and how he framed it. And it also made me think about...
You're going to put some science in here on us? Some nautical science?
It's true though, right? Like it's true. And I also think about where you talk about like the blacker, the more melanin is in the district. That's how funding is in places like Pennsylvania. They've shown on all of these various reports, the blacker the district, the less funding you're going to get, even if you control for poverty, meaning poor rural district white, poor rural district Black, same poverty level, the Black district is still going to get less money, right? And so like that framing of what Dr. Edmonds talked about is very real in a lot of different capacities when you're talking about our children and their education.
You know, he was studying real schools to bring this up. I mean, to create this idea around this theory around Black achievement and what it took in schools to make it happen. So he wasn't making this stuff up out of thin air. And we've heard it over years, over time, in the work that I've done with organizations trying to craft their communication strategy. It's like, what do you want to communicate? What's your theory? And we've thought about these things, like you have to have a coherent educational philosophy. You have to have a leader who knows that philosophy inside and out. And you have to have his ability to, or her ability to pick their team and have that team buy into that coherent
100%.
Right? So this isn't stuff we haven't heard before, but do you have any thoughts on why we can't scale that? Like why that would be a 50-year-old theory, more than a 50-year-old theory of change for the success, but we're talking about politics and poverty and problems with the kids and whatnot, when the system itself is ignoring some of the basics. Like we don't have school districts right now set up under the idea that you have a coherent educational philosophy, that we have well-trained and highly gifted instructional leaders leading teams of people who have bought into the comprehensive, coherent philosophy of education, and that they're able to pick and choose based on that, like whether or not. That's the opposite of the way that we staff schools and run schools right now. So why would we have this 50-year-old science and not be able to scale it? It doesn't make sense to me.
No, I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous. Listen, when I first became a principal, my first year, you cannot hire your own people. And I thought that was absolutely absurd. Like, you wait a minute, like I got one hand tied to the opposite foot, and I'm still here because these are my students, these are my children. Like, it was unbelievable. It was unbelievable. And a lot of it was, union pressure to not allow something like that to happen. Unfortunately, now they call it site selection. So you see more of that happening. But I remember when I got and initially it wasn't school-wide. It was only for those schools that were hard to staff, which was middle school, because a lot of educators are like, oh, I don't want to work with middle school students. They're learning too much, or they're too whatever. Or like, that's like the best time to catch them, right? Very early, and then middle school, like, to me, is just, amazing. But it's always like K to 12 is an amazing part where you get in wherever you fit in. But I started my career in middle school. I remember getting the message that, hey, your school will now be site selection. You'll be able to choose your students. Choose your the staff. And it wasn't even a full staff. It was just the teachers. You can choose the teachers. Man, that was the biggest game changer at Shaw Middle School, that we could actually build our own team. But before that, people were showing up to Shaw like with a yellow paper saying, yeah, I chose your school. Oh, let's talk. Why did you choose the school? Oh, it was closer. It's the SEPTA bus rode by there, so it was easy. Like that, like our vision about what our students, it ain't about the SEPTA bus bringing you here and making your life convenient. That's not the person I'm looking for. But once we could change it, and we started, like actually interviewing and talking about, this is our vision, this is where we're trying to go, this is what the community is demanding, and seeing like who rejects that and who buys in, that's a totally different ball game. And so you have that in other professions where you get to choose your team, and you have others where it's just like, nah, they choose, right? And it should be a match. And so I think part of it is just this resistance to do that. People are saying like, oh, it's going to be favoritism. Like, yeah, I'm going to show favoritism towards people that favor Black children, because that's who's in this building. Yeah, you daggone right. I'm going to show favoritism because I'm going to try to recruit and retain the best educators possible for these Black children. And I should have a say and be able to interrogate that to make sure that that's who they're selling themselves as.
Kimi, and I hope I'm saying your name right, Kimi. Kimi says, how in the world do you run an effective school when you can't pick your team? Michelle Johnson says, the problem with middle school is that many of the teachers were elementary trained and not trained in their content area. Ramona reminds us that what we were talking about oftentimes with teachers picking us rather than us picking teachers is called the dance of the limbs. But I think she's referring to the dance of the lemons.
Yeah.
And it's very hard to make lemonade when your whole staff is lemons and you ain't got no sugar. And sugar's content knowledge, just so y'all folks know, in this situation. And she's pointing out teachers who had difficulty in one side and could choose another, and the principal has no say. So thus, in many cities and districts, you have fight.
And where do you think they end up at?
Yeah, they end up, we know for a fact that they end up in the classrooms that get the darkest classrooms in the school district. Is the most crude way I can put it, because that's how it was studied in Minneapolis. The University of Minnesota has a study on our schools in Minneapolis that just on a scatter plot just showed the darker a classroom got, the lesser educated or the poorer performing or the less paid the teacher was. The scatter plot was on pay, but then they did other studies that just basically showed the worst performing teachers were congregating in the darkest schools. The schools with the most melanin had the poorest performing teachers, which is, it just is what it is. It's structural racism. When people say, "Oh no, there's no such thing as structural racism," it's just, you got bad parents. It's kind of like, nah, bro, we are not. No, we're not doing that right now. Alan says school districts are political entities, so what they do is determined by political forces. Sorry if you don't like that situation, but it is the situation, which I agree. Education is political. Being an educator is political. So you have to ask yourself, what kind of politician are you? Are you there to revolt? Are you there to join the team and get your pension and get your groove on? And it's true that political districts or school districts are political entities, just as Alan is saying. And Michelle Johnson, I think, is jumping in just to compound what we're already saying that you have to be able to hire your own people. If you can't hire your own teachers, I mean, like, what are we doing? That would be like, having a Super Bowl with two football teams that didn't get to pick any of their players. You have no idea what's going to happen in that particular game.
I mean, it's such a silly premise, but that's how I started my career. That's how many people are still in that career, because one, you have to establish what is the bar, right? And so people entering your community as the educators, people who are being paid, they should see like, oh, this is what this school is all about, right? Like, this is what they're doing, and without that, that like you're not going to get there. The work is already hard enough. If you get there with people who don't want to be there, folks who are just not looking at this as an absolute life or death situation for the students. Why are you there, right? And so I think we have to interrogate. A while ago, I wrote a blog about principals who, even when they have the power, are shy to talk about race, class, and privilege, which to me is the next thing. Like, we can say like, oh, they don't get to choose. Then you have principals and leadership teams who like, well, we're going to interview, but we're not going to actually ask anything about race, class, and privilege and how it plays out. We're not going to ask about biases. We're not going to ask this white teacher like, hey, have you ever had Black leadership before? And how did you interact with Black leadership? What biases might you have against this Black woman who is going to be your supervisor? She's the teacher leader. She may be your supervisor. Like, a whole lot of folks are like, I ain't touching that. Not only did I want to touch it, I want to dive all into it. Like, I want to know exactly what you think about the red, black, and green flag I got hanging out here, the Black studies that I went in multiple grades, how we talk about this community. I want to know all of that. I want to know.
You know what? I should have you back on not a Freedom Friday show, but on a regular show to talk about this situation with principals. Because what you're talking about right now, a principal who's too afraid to go all the way with what they should do. What I've seen in principals, they're a different animal in everybody else that I talk about in education, because they seem to be in this politician-y type of role. They have to be a politician with the district, with the public, with parents, with any media that shows up, and they're afraid of their shadows in some ways, because any of those things can eventually be a problem for you. Like, the teachers band together against you. All of a sudden, you got a bunch of teachers whatever. And if the district's coming down on you, and sometimes you're in between the teachers and the district, and the district's asking you to do dumb things, and the teachers don't want to do dumb things, but they want to do other dumb things. And then the parents don't want any of those things to happen. And the parents, in the public can get played in ways in which the teachers can go tell the parents that the principal is jacked up in some ways that aren't true. And that becomes a problem. Or, principal or parents who don't want equitable treatment of their students can go to the district and the superintendent and say the principal, oh my God, he's instituting honors for all. And now they're putting those kids in the classrooms with my kids who are perfectly well trained and deserve honors and blah, blah. And then, next thing you know, that principal might be at another school the next year.
He might be out of there. But that's the thing. So when I first became principals, we had a group of us, and we said, like, listen, don't be afraid to be fired. Like, if you're doing the right work, like that's, and I understand that's a level of privilege and a level of stubbornness and a level of something. But, we entered it saying, like, you know what, these kids have been neglected for generations. And we know it because we were also students in these schools. We're going to act as if, we understand what the North Star is, and that's Black liberation, and expect to be fired. Like, expect it. So if you're going to be fired tomorrow, how are you going to make sure that you do the best for your kids? And so it was a group of us, me, Chris Johnson, Aaron Stark, Keith Arrington, and we were mentored by Black principals who also had that way, like Salome Thomas L., who recently was fired a couple years ago by his board. The parents shut that ish down and said, nah, you bringing that man back. Right. And they did. Right. Like, and so, like, imagine that you're going to be fired. Like, just make your decisions that you are going to be fired tomorrow. Make your decisions that you're going to be there forever.
Well, I mean, that becomes one of the hard parts, though, Sharif. Like we want people in place in their roles, and so the infiltrate and double cross thing might mean that you need to be a very shrewd Machiavellian leader to be able to do two things at once: to be radical and to keep your job. Like to stay there and stay in place. Because I think one of the things that happens in education is if we don't like a superintendent doing radical things, we get rid of them. St. Paul, Minnesota paid almost $1 million to get rid of a superintendent that was doing radical stuff in the middle of her. Like, the teachers didn't like what she was doing. She was doing a bunch of equity-based stuff and equity work and race-based stuff. She went out to the public and said, listen, in our district, if you are a Black child who comes from a household that is $200,000 or more in income, you do worse than poor white kids in our district. So tell me it's not about race. That's what she went to the public and said, showed them the data and said, so tell me that race isn't a problem in there. Yep. So the teachers union ran an entire slate of candidates who ran on replacing her. That's what they ran on. And they got they got on the board. They ran, they won full union support. They set immediately about deconstructing all of her equity work that she had put that the white teachers didn't like. And they bought her out. They gave her damn near $1 million to just walk away. And so they could replace her with a mediocre white man who would come in and not do any of that stuff. And I haven't heard anything coming out of that district for years.
I'm gonna calm the waters, and folks are like, "Thank you. That's all we wanted, right?" Like, somebody to calm the waters. Like, no, I mean, that's for real.
I'm gonna talk gentle Minnesotan stuff and blah blah blah, and it's gonna be all good. But if you are willing to pay $1 million, first of all, people of color, listen, get your groove on. If someone's gonna pay you $1 million to quit, consider that success in one way. It's not good for the children of St. Paul that's what went down and happened, but make them feel it if they're going to do something that inequitable. But listen, I got one more person.
Oh yeah, that's right. That's right.
Yes. Before we go, because I want to give anybody short shrift in this list of folks. I do want to come back to this thing about principles, though, because in Ron Edmonds' work, one of the things that stands out to me is the amount of emphasis he puts on competent leadership.
Man.
And we talk about teachers all the time. We talk about teachers constantly, and no one, I'm going to say this, I'm going to put this out. I'm just going to say this, and Sharif, you were a principal, so don't get mad at me. Principals are worse than teachers. We talk about teachers 90% of the time, but we've given up on creating good principals. Like, there's no system pumping out good principals. There are better systems pumping out teachers than there are principals, and they have to go work for somebody.
Bruh, it's that's a whole nother show. But let me tell you, when we were in when I was a principal fellow with at the Department of Ed, it is one of the things that we talked to Secretary Duncan and his leadership, that the amount of principals, so we spend all the time about the teachers. You're absolutely right. And because their direct impact is colossal on students, right? But the other piece, the second most important variable is the principal. And in many ways, it's the most important variable because they are the ones that connect the dots for all the teachers that they have in their school. They're the ones that set the vision, the expectation, the culture. Like, they don't do it alone, but they set the bar, right? And so that role is absolutely crucial. And guess what? All the principals in public schools in America could fit in one Big Ten football stadium, about 100,000. Right. And if we can't get that right, but we're always talking about let's get the 3 whatever million teachers, but we ignore the 100,000 principals. Like, to me, that's insane. And Philly is like 300 something principals. It's no reason that we shouldn't be thinking about how to make every last one of these principals absolutely amazing.
You know why I think it's not happening, though, is I don't think anybody knows how. We've put a lot of stock in teachers and teaching teachers, and we're not getting that right. But we put a lot of stock on that's where the magic happens, which I believe is a lot of it's true. But the downstream thing is we believe that good principals come out of that pool. So if we just do well with making people great teachers, they will teach, and then they will be great teachers, and then they will eventually become principals.
Yeah.
And we don't, there's
bad
no
move.
It is a really bad move because we haven't developed. This is me talking as a lay person too. You've been a principal. I always have to say, this is me observing as an outsider. So people in the comments or whatnot, if you, I'm sure many of you have more insight than I do. Just as an observer, it seems to me that there aren't any fantastic principal programs turning out great principals and models. When I've looked for them and have asked people about them, they've pointed me to things that seem real insufficient. But more focus is on the teachers, I think, simply because if you get that right, people believe that out of that will come great principals. And I don't know that that's true. I don't know that promoting people who are great in the classroom automatically makes them a good leader of an entire building.
No, it does.
People are totally opposite,
Yeah, it's not the 100. It's not I was a great teacher. Now I'm going to of students. Now I'm going to be a great leader for adults and the entire building and community. Like, there's multifaceted. I think part of the problem, people misunderstand the role of the principal. You know what? We got to do the principal thing another time because we want to hear your second person.
Yeah, I do want to say Alan just jumped in with a comment. Alan says, no, we don't put a lot of stock in teachers. Teacher accountability is forced on the public education system. What's that tell you about how teachers are viewed by the public education system?
Well, Alan, we need accountability. Now, how that accountability, what it looks like, but I'm not trusting nobody with my precious 6-year-old daughter. I want some accountability. Damn it.
I would say this much, with Alan's point, that could be a different show too. So we're getting lots of shows out of this. Thanks, y'all, in the comments. We're getting different shows out of this. But this is what I'll say about Alan's point is, yeah, it's absolutely true that that's the way system views teachers, and that that we do, and to your point, we need to hold them accountable or whatnot. We also have to look at the fact that talented people don't want to work for a jackass. So, so if you have a principal problem and you're going to keep blaming teachers, but you're not if I was
not address that leader. Yeah.
I'm a talented person. I feel like I'm talented in what I do in life. Why are you going to have me work for a moron?
Listen,
why would I stay? Talented people could do other things.
Yeah, somebody wrote a blog, and I've been meaning to respond to it a while ago. It's basically I didn't quit on the kids or the school. I quit on the principal.
Yeah,
the principal was
Shantae Barnes.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. I mean, I was like, yes, absolutely. And that principal development is absolutely, and if you see pockets of it, that means it can be replicated. right?
Yeah.
Like if you see great principals around your city, around your state, around the country, then you can like tap into, okay, what made you there? One, we got to stop looking at principalship as just this one thing. And I told him, like, I want to be an instructional and cultural leader. I don't care. I don't want to know where the rock salt is when it snows. I don't want to know that. I want to have somebody on my team that I chose that's going to take care of that, right? Because we got the instructional leadership. We also got the political. You're a mayor of a small community, right? If you have 900 kids, 1,000 students, then you have also all of these constituents that represent their families, community members, district. You have to know how to do that. But at the end of the day, like, what's your North Star? And are you afraid? You know, try to be as free as you can on behalf of kids, and be open to being accountable to all of the stakeholders, right? What are kids saying about your what their experiences, what are teachers saying about their experience there, what are families saying about their experience? Like that to me was the most important. And everybody else, hey, if I was late with responding to an email downtown, oh well, I did something great for Black and brown kids today. Oh, I didn't implement that policy the way that you wanted to do. But hey, you know what? The families feel that they're respected and the children are feeling whole. Like, oh well, right? Like, so you have to decide who is your team.
Pick your
battles. For me, pick your battles. For me, it was parents, students, and staff. That's who I'm going to battle with.
All right, I'm gonna play this quick video because this is
Marva. Yeah, we can't shortchange Marva Collins. All right, let's play it.
When they walk in the door, I will say to them, welcome to success, say goodbye to failure, because here you are going to fail, and they're going to let you fail. You're here to win. You were born to win. And if I have to care more about you than you care about you, that's the way it will be. This day has been given to me. This day has been given to me. Fresh and clean. Fresh and clean. I can either use it. Or throw it away. I promise that it shall be used. Not lost. I will be superior in my ability. In my thoughts. In my deeds. And in my actions. And you must be.
This is Marva Collins, a Chicago City school teacher who, dissatisfied with her own children's education, decided to start her own school.
Basically, 5 years ago, I just felt that there were far too many children being recruited for failure, far too many excuses being used for not educating children. Living in this area myself, I really felt that somehow there were far too many lives just hanging out there in a perilous vacuum. So I decided that whatever I did, I could do no worse. So I decided to start my own school.
Westside Preparatory School was born September 8, 1975, located in Marva's Westside Chicago home. Marva operated the school in her home for 4 years. In 1980, Westside Preparatory expanded into this former bank building a few blocks from Marva's home.
And there you have it. Marva Collins, one of my favorites. Just love the story of, I saw a problem. I wasn't going to participate in the problem. I felt like I could do better. I love it how she says, I for sure couldn't do any worse. I mean, that's my favorite kind of like response to the situation. Like the question of like, why would you do this? Well, I didn't think I could do any worse. What made you think you could take this on? Well, they were doing pretty bad. Marva, for me, the reason why I think it's important to pull her up as an ancestor is it's not about theory. It's about actually jumping in and starting something and build something that will last. Both of the people that I'm bringing up are people that were builders. Ron Edmonds built something that still has import today. Starting schools are things that have a material consequence in life. They become something that's real, that it's not theory. Many of our people today, the import for me today is many of our people are theoreticians. Right. They're people who write books, they give speeches, they give books and speeches at the same place and give autographs and take pictures, and they get in people's social media and whatnot. And you were to say to them, where's your school? Where's your monument? Where's the thing that you have built? The heritage, the Black educational heritage is a stacking of pieces of gold. It is a stacking of things that people have built that our educational ancestors have built and stacked on to each other, on top of each other, and they create a monument that glows in the sun. It just shines. What is your part of that? Is your part, because all the talk around it is like the seeds on the ground that the wind blow away. So all the words are just seeds on the ground, and God's wind is just blowing them to the side. But the things that got rooted and got planted grew trees that create the garden around the great, great, great monument. People like Marva built something, right? Something of, and she didn't build anything that you just go to hotel conferences and talk about over bad food, right? Like she built something that, again, to my thing about the achievement gospel, no, kids can learn at a high level. This is how we're going to do it. This is how we're going to make it happen, how we're going to prove it. This is going to be our scope, our sequence, our pedagogy. This is how we're going to staff. This is where we're going to put it. We don't need all the fanciest stuff in the world. I can do it in my house. I could do it in a barn. I could do it in a hut in Africa. I could do it wherever. Kids can learn wherever you put them.
Or a building in Africa. Does it have to be a hut in Africa?
I use a hut because I do think it's more important to say that there are African kids who have educators standing before them without a computer, who are drawing on a board what a computer looks like.
Yeah.
And you have kids with dirt beneath their feet who are outperforming kids in Harlem. Right.
Yeah, that's real. I mean, I've visited African schools in Senegal, the Congo, and Rwanda, and the students were like sucking it up. And I've always mentioned, like, and I went to school in Qom for middle school. Man, I told you this story before. I like the math book was like this for my 8th grade math class in Qom. And I came back to Philly and went to high school, skipped a grade, could have skipped 2 grades. Mama wouldn't let me. Their math book was this thick. And I was like, wow, they're learning all that. And I got in the classroom. I'm like whispering to the teacher, like, that's wrong. Like what you just put on the board, that's actually wrong. And I stopped because at one point I did not want him to announce it to class. And once he did, like, oh, thank you, Sharif, for that. I was like, all right, you get my help no more. Like I didn't want all that, all that energy. But yeah,
I see Melanie Acosta is accosting me. She is saying she disagrees. She says it is about theory. The question is, what theory are folks drawing on to educate Black children?
Yes, so but it's theory is separate from action, then it's not potent. Like, and I think what you're talking about is not that the ones that grow roots are devoid of theory. It's that it's theory and research action is better than research. Action research is better than research, right? And
I think all the people that built something, Booker T. Washington's 5,000 schools weren't built on nothing. They had a theory behind it. As a matter of fact, down to the blueprints of what the school should look like. Mm-hmm. They had thought it through. Like the school should face this way so that the sun can come through the windows and that it can heat and it can provide light and it could do, like they really thought about the buildings and how they would be built. There was a theory behind it. But I was just talking about the people who live completely in theory world and have a black belt in theory and have a white belt in practical in implementation of their theories.
Implementation and application of it.
It's kind of like if you go on the internet and you go to YouTube, there are all these martial arts teachers. And then there's this other genre of videos showing them getting their asses kicked in real fights. And it's like, and it's the people who sell themselves on teaching you like Steven Seagal type stuff, right? And then when you get them in an actual fight, they don't know how to fight. That's my thinking here is it's the people who look good and sound good on paper in terms of theory. And then you tell them, okay, well, come down to my classroom and take over a class for a week. And don't tell me, show me. Like, come show me, you great teacher, come show me, come do this. Marva Collins is my person on this in saying I can teach in my living room. And kids can learn. You're gonna learn today, which is what I hear Lagra Newman say at Purpose Prep in Nashville. Love her quotes. She says it over and over again. I don't know what else is going on in your life or what's going on outside these walls, but you're gonna learn today. Mm-hmm. If you come in this building, you're gonna learn today, right? That's her thing, and I love it, because that's the spirit of Marva coming through a school leader today in Nashville, for instance. So, anyways, that's all I got, man. 2 people who I think built something in our Black history, tradition, ancestry that contributed to the garden, contributed to the monument, contributed to the glowing thing, and we should be keeping centered in all of our thinking about how we educate kids, and stop chasing the gurus, stop chasing the next book that is going to make everything good for you, and start doing deeper analysis of the people who are on the right side of history. And for me, this is how I'm making the historical pitch to you and to others. There's a long tradition of thinking that Black people are deficient and that they can't learn, and that there are many excuses and reasons why they shouldn't be able to learn the alphabet and how to put letters together, and then a sentence, and then a paragraph, and then read a book, right? Mm-hmm. And there's another group of people in our lineage who are the stronger group, who said, I can teach you under a tree. I can teach you in a church basement. If there's going to be a poll tax, if there's going to be a literacy requirement to vote, we need to teach you to read, and I'm going to teach you to read so you can vote, right? We have a long history of achievement as being like who we think we are. We think we're about achievement until more recently, until the 60s, and until very literally, honestly, white progressives got in the mix and started selling us our own inferiority. And I say progressives because they're supposed to be our friends. I think a lot of conservatives were already on the side of you're inferior. You know, I don't think like
they were loud and clear about it. Yeah. And the other ones.
What's your final word, bro? On all that, I feel like I gave a long pitch in the end here. So.
No, I mean, listen, I agree with what you said. I love the fact that we ended with Marva Collins, because I think, the essence of, what she brings to the table, the intellectual genealogy, the practice. She reminds me of a teacher in Philadelphia. She had a post office. She worked at a post office, and she said, you know what? She just kept seeing all these issues, and she said, I'm gonna start a school. And there were a lot of Negroes who said, woman, you got a good job. You work for the government at the post office. Like, why are you gonna quit that? She quit and started a school. My oldest son attended. It's called Academy of the Way. And when I think about Marva Collins, I think about people like, that mama that started the school. I think about people like Yvonne Savior. And what you mentioned, they operate as if educational justice and racial justice can never be separated. It is one thing. And I think if we operate that way, if we hire that way, if we hold principals and everyone accountable in that way, then we're talking about a different ballgame. We're talking about a different way of life for our students, for the educators, and for everybody. But I think, I gave a talk the other day at Enstoy, and I'm like, not only do we want to know who's teaching the kids, the students, I want to know who's teaching the teachers, because that's going to tell me ultimately what those student outcomes look like. And right now, I'm very dissatisfied with a lot of the people who are training and teaching the teachers who are going to be in front of my children and your children and our children.
Well, that's a great place to end. I think we had another good Freedom Friday. I hope we made people feel like they should be free, and that we should be raising free people, and that we have examples in our own history to do it. I appreciate you as always, brother. You come on every week. You bring so much knowledge and make it so much easier to have these conversations. You make the show intelligent, so I appreciate that.
No, yeah, you do that. You do it well. I appreciate the platform. Thank you for all your work, man, and thank you for this. Freedom Friday feels liberating for me. And
I love it. I look forward to it every week. When I wake up on Fridays, I feel like, oh, this is going to be like a day where I get to talk about good stuff, like where I really appreciate the forum. I also appreciate everybody watching and listening. We have some new faces in today. You don't have to agree with me, disagree with Sharif or the message, whatnot. What we do have to do is have fellowship and have a place to be with each other, where we commune and we come together and we share thoughts, resources, ideas, cross-pollinate. And I like today's message about contributing to that heritage, keeping it centered and realizing we've got all that we need, like in that garden of ideas and thoughts and Black thoughts and whatnot. Our problem is we're just real bad gardeners. That's our real problem. Our real problem is that we keep leaving the garden and going to other people's pastures and cleaning up their crap out of their pastures and claiming it's gold and bringing it back to our schools when we have our own gold. It's there. We don't need yours. So anyways, that's so many metaphors today.
Yeah.
I feel like I did metaphors to death.
No, it's good. It's good. Metaphors get you thinking. Get you thinking.
Appreciate you all. Have a blessed weekend, and we will see you again next week. Freedom Fridays.
Fridays. Yes, sir.